The stars were alive with ships of every kind, shining like scattered jewels across the dark, endless sky. The grand fleets of alien empires gathered near a quiet blue planet to witness a show that promised to be both cruel and unforgettable. They came in thousands of vessels, long and sharp and glowing, with engines so bright they lit up the void, as if mocking the silence of space. Their banners carried colors of red, gold, and black. Their hulls were painted with scars from wars fought across galaxies, yet none of them carried fear tonight, because the spectacle was not a battle, but a humiliation. In the middle of this vast circle of ships floated a single vessel, small, slow, and old. The human ship called Erebus. Its surface was grey and plain, no banners, no pride, no heavy armor like the alien warships. Its engines sputtered with a dull orange glow compared to the blinding blue fire of alien thrusters. It seemed fragile, almost broken, the kind of ship that would be forgotten in any hangar. And yet here it was the center of attention. The target of laughter. Alien voices filled the comms networks, carried across fleets by translators. They laughed in languages that echoed like metallic growls and piercing chimes, mocking the humans who dared to enter the Galactic Council's trials. The Zorath warlord sneered in his tongue that rolled like thunder, calling the human vessel a rusted coffin. The Kalari admiral, whose ships floated like crystal shards, whispered that humans were barely evolved mammals who had stumbled into the stars too early, and the Drakari queen, with her hive ships buzzing like angry insects, declared that today would mark the end of Earth's pride before it ever began. Inside the Erebus, the crew sat, in silence, listening to the taunts, every word stabbing like a blade. They had heard it all before. Humans, weak humans, fragile humans, slow. Compared to the burning speed of alien drives, humans were nothing but an accident that crawled out of a small world. Yet tonight was different, because tonight they carried a secret, a power not even the Galactic Council understood. Captain Rourke stood at the center of the bridge, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. He had faced alien mockery for years, but this moment was heavier. He looked at his crew, their faces pale but burning with quiet fire. Engineer Ava sat hunched over glowing panels, her fingers trembling, but her eyes focused. She knew more than anyone what their ship held beneath its plain surface, what was locked deep inside the drive chamber. Rourke raised his hand, silencing the nervous whispers on the bridge, and spoke slowly so all could hear. Their ship may be called weak, but weakness can be the greatest mask. Let them laugh. Let them believe. We crawl like insects, and when the moment comes, we will show them what crawls can become when they learn to fly. The order came from the Galactic Council: begin the trial. 3 ships from 3 alien empires would race against the Erebus through a mapped corridor of space. Whoever completed the run first would earn the Council's respect. Failure would mean humiliation for Earth and perhaps exile from interstellar diplomacy forever. The aliens roared with confidence. They powered their engines, sending waves of burning light across the void. The human vessel, on the other hand, barely moved forward, crawling like a shadow. The alien crowds watching from orbital stations laughed louder. The commentators described the human ship as pathetic. Slow, hopeless, they spoke, as if victory was already decided. And yet the Erebus continued steady, calm, silent. Not rushing, not competing like a predator, walking among prey, pretending to be harmless. Minutes passed. The alien vessels surged ahead, their drives cutting through the void, like blades through silk. The Erebus trailed far behind, so far that even human allies hidden in the crowd began to lose hope. What chance did they have? How could a ship with sputtering engines defeat giants built for war? The laughter grew louder until it shook the channels like thunder. And then it happened. Engineer Ava's hands danced across controls, her voice calm but filled with hidden fear. Captain Rourke gave a single nod. Engage the aperture, drive the... Words seemed ordinary, But what followed was not. The ship shuddered, every light dimmed. The crew felt their bodies pull and twist as if reality itself had clenched its fist around them. The stars outside flickered, once then vanished in the alien. Fleet's alarms screamed. Radars, lost, signal scanners burned with static. The human vessel was gone. No warp signature, no jump trace, no fragments. It had not moved forward or backward. It had simply vanished as if erased from existence. The laughter stopped. Silence filled the channels. Even the alien admirals who once mocked now spoke with sharp voices demanding answers. Was it cloaking? Was it sabotage? Impossible, said their scientists. No known technology could erase a ship from all spectrums. Then without, warning space itself trembled, and the Erebus reappeared not ahead, not behind, but directly in the middle of the alien formation. Ships collided. Panicked pilots swerved too late. Two cruisers shattered against each other. Another was pulled into a black ripple left behind by the human vessel. Panic spread through the fleets. The Galactic Council chambers erupted in shouts. Some demanded the humans be disqualified. Others screamed for explanations. Captain Rourke simply stood silent on his bridge, his face calm as the ship drifted forward, as if nothing unusual had happened. But inside, the crew's hearts thundered because they knew what they had unleashed was more than a jump drive. It was something unnatural, something that tore not through space, but through the very skin of reality. The aliens tried to recover their pride. They launched accusations calling the humans cheats, liars, thieves of forbidden technology, but the truth was clear. Every witness saw the impossible with their own eyes. The weak human vessel had outrun and outmaneuvered the most powerful fleets without speed, without firepower, but with something no other empire possessed. The race ended in chaos, no clear winner declared, but every eye now turned to Earth. The species mocked as slow had unveiled a weapon that made speed meaningless. The laughter had died, replaced by whispers of fear and suspicion, and in the quiet aftermath Captain Rourke spoke once more, his words simple, carried only to his crew. They call us weak, but weakness gave us the freedom to hide what strength we truly hold. And now they will never laugh the same way again. The Erebus drifted into Shadow Engine's dim, its crew shaken, yet burning with secret pride outside the alien fleets. Scattered, fearful, uncertain, none dared approach too close. For the first time in centuries, humanity was not prey, not an accident, not a weakling crawling through the stars. Humanity had become something unknown, something dangerous, and the galaxy had no choice but to watch. The galaxy was still buzzing with whispers after the disappearance and return of the human ship, Erebus. The council chambers were drowned in arguments, shouts, and confusion, yet among the endless noise, one truth burned brighter than any star. Humans had done something no empire thought possible. They had not jumped, they had not warped, they had not cloaked. They had erased themselves from existence and then returned wherever they wished. Across the fleets, alien commanders tried to explain it to themselves. The Zorath warlord declared it was trickery. Nothing more, a hidden teleporter perhaps, or a distortion field. But deep down, even his proud heart trembled. The Kalari admiral sat in her crystal ship, her voice sharp with fear, claiming no known power could bend reality like that. And the Drakari queen, whose hive ships circled like swarms of living steel, hissed that the humans had awakened a curse that should have remained buried. Inside the Erebus, the crew sat in silence there, hearts still pounding from the impossible jump. The chamber lights flickered as if the ship itself was still shaking from what it had done. Engineer Ava leaned against her console, her skin pale sweat on her forehead. She whispered, "It was not supposed to be like this." Captain Rourke turned his eyes toward her, calm but heavy. "Explain," he said, and she did. The aperture drive, she revealed, was never meant for speed. It was not designed to outrun other ships or to make simple jumps across star systems. It was built from fragments of research found deep within ruins on a frozen moon, ruins that did not belong to humans or any known race. The engine had been rebuilt with human hands, but the heart of it was alien, older than the stars themselves. And every time it engaged, she could feel something, watching something, pressing against the walls of reality, trying to get through. The crew shifted uneasily, but none spoke out loud. They all remembered the moment of vanishing, the silence of nothingness, the weight on their souls like drowning without water, and the cold whisper that touched their minds when they were nowhere, a whisper that felt alive. Captain Rourke stood tall, his voice steady. "We cannot show fear. Now the galaxy is watching. If they sense weakness, they will strike harder than ever." But his own hands shook when he thought of the void, the space between spaces, and the voice that had brushed across his mind. Back among the alien fleets, panic grew. Scanners failed to explain the disappearance. Navigation systems replayed impossible data. The humans had not moved faster. They had simply ignored distance itself. The ambassadors demanded answers. The council ordered the Erebus held for questioning, but the human leaders sent a single cold reply: "The drive is ours. It belongs to humanity." Whispers turned to threats. Threats turned to fear. Because the truth none dared to admit was simple: if humans could vanish at will, they could appear anywhere inside fortresses inside. Command fleets inside homeworld skies. No shield, no wall, no defense could stop them anymore. And so the laughter that once filled alien voices was gone, replaced by the unease of prey, realizing the hunter had been hidden among them all along. But inside the Erebus, the crew themselves were divided. Some believed the engine was a gift, their chance to stand equal against the galaxy. Others feared it was a curse, one that would swallow them whole. Engineer Ava spoke again. She described what she felt in the jump. When the ship was nowhere, she heard not one voice, but many whispers, like 1,000 eyes staring through a crack in the wall. Reality itself bending and watching. She begged Captain Rourke to shut the drive down, to never use it again. Rourke listened, but his answer was simple: "We do not have that luxury." For as he spoke, the council fleets began to move, alien warships shifting positions like wolves surrounding a wounded animal. Messages came sharp and cold, hand over the aperture: "Drive or be destroyed." Captain Rourke stared at the screens, his crew watching for his command. "If we hand it over, humanity dies as prey. If we keep it, humanity lives as something more. The choice is already made." And so the Erebus drifted deeper into the void, engines dim, but its presence burning like a flame across the galaxy. The aliens followed in silence, not daring to strike too soon, fearing another impossible vanishing, yet unable to let the humans go. 3 hours passed, the crew restless. The silence heavy, and then the alarms screamed. Scanners caught movement from nowhere. Not alien ships, not council fleets, but shadows forming in the void. Dark shapes flickering on and off. Sensors like ghosts. Engineer Ava gasped, her eyes wide. She whispered, "They followed us from the other side." The bridge fell into chaos. Strange distortions surrounded the Erebus, shapes like ships, but twisted as if broken across dimensions. They drifted closer, their outlines bending light, their forms impossible to understand. And from the comms came static layered with whispers, voices that were not words but feelings. Hunger, curiosity, anger. The same whispers the crew had heard in the void. The aperture drive pulsed with light, glowing brighter as if answering. "A call," Captain Rourke shouted to shut it down, but Ava screamed, "We cannot. It is not listening anymore." The ship trembled, the walls groaned. The crew felt the same crushing weight as before, the feeling of drowning without water. The whispers louder. Now pressing into their thoughts, some of the crew clutched their heads, screaming. Some cried, others prayed, and in the middle of it, Rourke stood holding himself against the madness, shouting orders no one could follow. And then, as suddenly as it began, the shapes vanished. Silence returned. The drive dimmed. The ship floated once more in the empty void. The crew collapsed, breathing heavy, their eyes filled with terror. but also with something worse, curiosity. Engineer Ava whispered again, "The drive is not a machine. It is alive, it chooses, it listens, it watches." Captain Rourke stared at the dark core chamber through the glass, his face pale. He did not answer, but in his heart he knew she was right, and that meant humanity had not built the aperture drive. They had awakened it. Word of the vanishing and reappearance spread faster than any fleet across the galaxy. The Council now demanded immediate surrender of Earth's technology, but fear kept them from attacking too soon. Already smaller empires spoke of forming alliances with humanity for protection. Others spoke of destroying Earth before the power spread too far. The galaxy had turned upside down because of one ship, one crew, and one impossible drive. The Erebus moved quietly through the stars, carrying a secret heavier than any weapon, the crew broken between pride and terror. Every jump, now a gamble, every moment of silence, a reminder of the void that had stared back at them, and somewhere deep inside the hum of the aperture drive, a whisper lingered like a promise, like a threat. It said more doors are waiting. The Erebus drifted in silence across the black ocean of stars, the crew shaken but alive, each breath heavy with the memory of the whispers that had crawled into their minds. When the aperture drive had awakened, Captain Rourke stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the empty void. But in his heart he knew it was not empty. He could still feel the weight of unseen eyes, watching them from beyond. Alien fleets trailed at a distance, their ships burning bright like hunting lanterns in the dark, but none dared come too close, not after what they had witnessed, not after the impossible vanishing and reappearance. The Council ordered restraint. They wanted the ship captured intact, not destroyed, but the commanders of those fleets were less patient. They spoke in private channels, whispering of ambushes and traps, because fear can breed caution, but it can also breed desperation. Inside the Erebus, the crew tried to return to routine, but nothing felt normal anymore. Engineer Ava worked with trembling hands, her eyes always drifting to the core chamber where the aperture drive pulsed faintly like a beating heart. It should have been silent, but sometimes she swore she heard faint murmurs through the walls, words she could not understand. Captain Rourke asked her for status, and she replied stable but unpredictable. And that was the truth. The drive was alive, and no one knew what it wanted. As the Erebus moved through mapped corridors of space, the alien fleets began to reposition ahead, blocking exits, preparing a cage. They broadcast a final message: surrender the aperture drive, or face annihilation. Captain Rourke received the message, his face hard. The crew looked to him for guidance. Some begged to run, others to fight, but Rourke only said quietly, "If they think us prey, let us remind them what prey can do." The trap was set, 3 fleets forming a triangle of firepower, thousands of weapons locking. On the Erebus, as it drifted into range, the aliens waited to strike, holding their fire, until the Council gave the order. But the silence was more terrifying than any battle. The crew of the Erebus felt like insects under glass about to be burned by the focused sun. Then came the voice of the Council, cold and commanding surrender. Now Captain Rourke closed his eyes for a breath, then opened them and gave the order, engage the aperture drive. The ship shuddered. The lights dimmed once more. The familiar, crushing weight fell upon the crew. Reality bent and tore, but this time it was not like before. The drive screamed with energy. The hull rattled like it would split apart. The crew clutched their seats. Some cried out in pain, and then space shattered. To the alien fleets, it looked like glass breaking across the void, a fracture spreading in every direction, shards of reality folding inward. The Erebus disappeared, and in its place opened a rift, like a wound, glowing with white fire. The rift pulled. With monstrous force ships too close, were dragged in, helplessly torn apart, like paper crushed and twisted into fragments of nothingness. Thousands of alien voices screamed across comms before vanishing into silence. When the Erebus reappeared, it was no longer where it had been. It drifted calmly beyond the enemy formation, while behind it, chaos burned the rift, still open, sucking entire warships into its impossible light. Commanders shouted orders, fleets scrambled to escape, but hundreds were lost to the fracture of space itself. The trap had become a grave. Captain Rourke stared at the destruction, his face grim, his crew stunned. None of them had expected such power. They had meant only to escape, not to destroy entire fleets. But the Aperture Drive had chosen otherwise. The survivors of the ambush fled, their voices sharp with terror. The humans are cursed. The humans are monsters. The humans must be stopped, but none dared pursue too closely. Fear spread like fire across the stars. Fear that one small human vessel could unravel reality itself. Back on the Erebus, the crew sat in heavy silence. Engineer Ava whispered, "We are playing with forces we cannot control. This is not victory. This is doom." Captain Rourke turned to her. He's tired and said, "Yet if we surrender, it is extinction. Either way, we walk a road none of us chose, but we must walk." His voice was steady, but inside his mind echoed with the memory of the whispers in the void, the voices that had touched him each time the drive had opened a door. And he feared the drive was not merely a weapon, it was a gateway. The Galactic Council could no longer hide their fear. They declared the humans unstable, a threat to the balance of the galaxy. Some demanded immediate war, others demanded secrecy, fearing that knowledge of the Aperture Drive would fracture their own empires. But one truth was clear. Humanity was no longer a weakling species mocked and dismissed. They were now a force that could shake the stars themselves. As the Erebus moved deeper into the void, a strange silence fell over the crew. No laughter, no small talk. Only the constant hum of the living drive. Each of them carried fear, like a shadow they had seen, what it could do. They had seen entire fleets swallowed into nothing, and yet deep down, a part of them felt pride that humanity had finally shown the galaxy. It would not kneel again. Captain Rourke stood at the bridge window, his reflection dark against the stars, and whispered to himself, "Let them mock no longer, let them fear." But in the core chamber, the drive pulsed faster, as if answering his words. The whispers faint, but growing clearer. "With every beat, more doors are waiting," the voice said. And with each word, Captain Rourke felt the truth pressing against his mind. The Erebus had not simply traveled through space, it had touched something far older and far darker. And whatever it was not done with them yet. The Erebus drifted through the silent. Dark the stars around her, cold and endless, the crew shaken after the destruction of the alien fleets. Some sat in silence, unable to speak. Others stared blankly at their hands, as if the blood of thousands was still upon them. Captain Rourke walked the bridge slowly, his boots heavy on the floor. The faces of his crew weighed on him, each one carrying fear and guilt, yet none dared voice it out loud, for they all knew the truth. They had survived, but not by skill or courage. They had survived because the Aperture Drive had chosen to open its jaws and devour their enemies. Across the galaxy, the story spread faster than light. Entire fleets shattered by one fragile human vessel. Whispers turned to rumors. Rumors turned to terror. The humans had a ship that could break the universe itself. No shield, no weapon, no empire could resist that truth. And so the council met in secret chambers, voices echoing through vast halls carved of crystal and iron. Some shouted for war, destroy Earth before. The power spread, others demanded caution, fearing the same fate as those lost to the rift. But one thing united them all. Humanity was no longer to be mocked. Humanity was now a threat. Meanwhile, the Erebus entered a quiet system, a star burning dim A handful of broken moons drifting in orbit here, Captain Rourke ordered silence and repairs. The crew obeyed, though their hearts were restless. Engineer Ava moved through the core chamber, her eyes locked on the aperture drive, its surface pulsing. Faint light, like veins glowing under skin, she reached out her hand, hovering inches from its surface. She swore she could feel warmth, as if the machine breathed. She whispered to herself, "It is alive, and it hears us." The crew gathered in the mess hall. Later voices, low arguments sharp. Some wanted to abandon the drive, cast it into a star before it consumed them. Others wanted to return to Earth and hand it to their leaders for protection. But a few voices spoke with something darker, with pride. They said, "The aliens fear us now. They will never mock us again. We have the strongest weapon in the galaxy. We should use it to claim respect, maybe even rule." Captain Rourke listened to all, then spoke, his voice low and hard. "We will not be tyrants, but we will not be prey. If this drive is a curse, then we will master it, not surrender it." Unknown to them, the alien fleets were already moving. The Council had agreed on a plan, a massive ambush. Not just 3 fleets this time, but dozens combined. A wall of fire stretching across the system. Their orders clear: destroy the Erebus if possible, but capture the drive at any cost. As the humans drifted among the broken moons, they were being hunted by the strongest armada ever assembled. The first sign came as shadows across the edge of scanners, distant, but countless. Engineer Ava shouted alarms. The crew rushed to stations. Captain Rourke stood tall, his face hard. "They are here. The trap is closing outside the void, lit with thousands of ships, encircling the system, their weapons glowing like suns, their engines howling like storms." The aliens sent one final message, a voice that echoed across every channel: "Surrender the aperture drive. Surrender your vessel or be erased." Captain Rourke answered with silence, then gave a single command: "Hold steady." The Erebus floated calm, as if waiting for death weapons locked on it from every direction. Tension thick like chains around the crew, hearts pounding, waiting for the order to fire. And then Captain Rourke raised his hand and whispered, "Engage!" The aperture drive roared to life. The ship trembled, but this time it was different. The drive pulsed faster, brighter. The crew screamed as reality bent around them. The stars twisted, the moons shattered, under invisible pressure, and then the Erebus split space apart. Not a simple vanishing, not a small rift. This time the void cracked open like a mirror smashed by a hammer. Shards of glowing light tearing in all directions. The enemy fleet screamed, their weapons firing wildly. But it was too late. Ships were dragged into fractures, torn into fragments, crushed by invisible walls. The ambush collapsed into chaos. Commanders shouted in terror, "Retreat, retreat!" But the rift pulled them like a hungry beast, devouring their fleets one by one. The crew of the Erebus held on for life alarms, blaring consoles exploding. Engineer Ava screamed, "The drive is pushing too far. It will tear us with them." Captain Rourke clenched his fists, his voice iron-hold. The course the void outside burned, with impossible light space itself, folding inward as the aperture drive fed on its own fury. Then suddenly silence. The rift collapsed. The Erebus reappeared, drifting beyond the wreckage. Thousands of alien ships. Gone in seconds, the survivors scattered, running blind with fear. Inside the bridge, the crew sat frozen, their breath shallow, their bodies weak. They had lived, but they all knew it was not victory. It was survival by madness. The drive had done more than they commanded. It had unleashed chaos far greater than they had intended. Engineer Ava looked at Captain Rourke, her eyes full of fear. She whispered, "It is not under our control. It chooses what to do, not us." Rourke looked back at her, his face shadowed by the faint glow of the drive through the glass. Maybe he said, "But until we understand it, we have no choice but to keep using it." The galaxy, however, understood something else. The humans were no longer weak. They were monsters that could not be stopped. Entire armadas had vanished, entire fleets destroyed by a single ship. Fear spread like wildfire. Worlds whispered of surrender, others whispered of extermination. The council itself began to fracture, some empires preparing to betray. Others, all because of one fragile vessel called Erebus. But in the quiet aftermath, as the crew of the Erebus tried to rest, Engineer Ava lay awake in her quarters. The whispers had returned stronger than ever, pressing against her mind. She could hear them clearly now, not just words but voices, ancient, vast and hungry. They said more doors are waiting, and with those words she saw visions, stars crumbling, galaxies, burning shadows, moving through endless corridors of black. She woke, trembling, sweat soaking her skin, her heart pounding. She knew with certainty the drive was not simply a machine, it was a door to something beyond, and whatever was waiting behind that door wanted to come through. She went to Captain Rourke, her voice desperate. She begged him to stop, to shut it down before it was too late, but Rourke only shook his head, his voice heavy. The galaxy already hunts us. We cannot stop now. If we do, we die, but if we keep moving, maybe, just maybe, we survive. Ava looked at him with eyes full of fear and whispered, "And what if survival means unleashing something worse than death?" Captain Rourke had no answer, only silence, and in the distance the aperture drive pulsed again, like the slow, steady beat of a heart, waiting for the next moment to tear reality apart. Fear spread like a storm across the galaxy, word of the destruction, and carried on every channel, every trade route, every whisper, in every shadow. The Erebus had torn apart fleets that once ruled the stars. It had turned ambushes into graveyards and armadas into wreckage. Entire empires trembled, not because of numbers or firepower, but because of one fragile ship with an engine that did not obey the laws of space. Alien children were told stories of humans as warnings. Alien leaders sat sleepless in war chambers, calculating what it meant to face a species that carried a weapon capable of undoing reality itself. On Earth, leaders argued in secret halls. Some demanded the return of the Erebus to protect humanity from retaliation. Others wanted to use its power to force respect from the galaxy, and a few darker voices whispered that this was the moment for humanity to rise and claim dominion over the stars. But Captain Rourke and his crew were far from home, drifting in silence across the void, carrying both the fear of their enemies and the burden of their own survival. Inside the ship, the crew no longer laughed, no longer argued. They worked with quiet obedience, each of them haunted by visions from the jumps. Every time the drive had opened, they felt something brush against them, cold whispers in their ears, shadows pressing against their thoughts. Even in sleep, they heard voices like distant echoes calling from across endless corridors. "More doors are waiting," they said, "more doors." Engineer Ava grew thinner with every passing day, her eyes hollow, her hands trembling. She spent hours in the core chamber, staring at the glowing surface of the aperture drive. She swore it pulsed faster when she approached, as if recognizing her. Sometimes she thought she saw shapes moving in its light, forms twisting like shadows pressed against glass. She told Captain Rourke that the drive was not only alive, but aware of them, aware of everything. He told her to rest, but he too could no longer escape the feeling of being watched. Across the stars, alien governments began to fracture. Some races whispered of making peace with humanity, hoping to stand beneath their shadow. Others demanded immediate extermination before the power spread, but fear kept them from moving too soon. Fear of vanishing into rifts like those fleets already lost. And so for the first time in living memory, the galaxy stood frozen, waiting, watching humanity with eyes full of dread. On the Erebus, silence ruled until one night alarms screamed through the ship. Scanners lit with impossible readings, distortions blooming around them, ripples like invisible waves through space. Captain Rourke rushed to the bridge. The crew already at stations. Engineer Ava shouted, "It is not us. The drive is cold. It is something." Else the screen lit with shapes forming from nothing. Shadows twisting into ships, not alien, not human, but broken things. Their hulls bending at impossible angles, their engines flickering like dying stars. They moved with jerks and lurches as if reality itself resisted their presence. The crew stared frozen, some whispering prayers, some unable to breathe. The shapes closed in surrounding the Erebus. Static filled the comms, and through it came voices not of words but feelings. Hunger, anger, curiosity. Captain Rourke felt them pressing against his mind, his chest heavy, his vision blurring. Engineer Ava screamed. They came through the doors. The aperture drive pulsed, alive without command, light spilling into the chamber. The ship shuddered. The whispers turned to screams as the shapes moved closer. Weapons failed, scanners collapsed. The Erebus drifted helpless, caught between fear and madness. Captain Rourke ordered evasive maneuvers, but the ship barely moved. The shapes pressed closer, reaching for them with arms of broken metal and light. The crew cried out, the walls groaned, and then the drive unleashed a pulse, not ordered, not controlled, a wave of white fire that shattered the shadows, scattering them into fragments of nothingness. Silence returned, but the crew knew it was not over. They had not destroyed them, only pushed them back. Engineer Ava fell to her knees, her voice shaking. They are not ships. They are pieces of what waits beyond the doors. Captain Rourke lifted her to her feet, his face pale. What do they want? She shook her head. Everything. The galaxy soon heard rumors of the encounter, whispers of the Erebus facing not fleets, but phantoms from the void. Many dismissed it as human lies. Others whispered in fear that the humans had not just built a weapon, but awakened something ancient, something that even the oldest empires dared not face, and in hidden corners, some even wondered if the humans themselves were now servants of that power, not masters. On board the Erebus, the crew carried on, but their eyes carried shadows. Sleep brought nightmares, voices in dreams, doors opening, corridors stretching without end. Captain Rourke gathered his officers, speaking low. We are hunted by two enemies, the aliens outside. And whatever waits inside the drive, we must prepare for both. Engineer Ava interrupted, her voice sharp. It is not just waiting, it is moving. The drive is not stable. It wants to open again. Rourke asked, what happens if we refuse? She looked at him. With dead eyes, it will open anyway. As days passed, the Alien Council finally broke the silence. They declared humanity a galactic threat. They called upon every empire to join in a final war to destroy the Erebus before its power consumed them all. Fleets gathered larger than anything seen in history, a storm of fire and steel prepared to descend on Earth. But their first target was the Erebus itself, a symbol of terror that had to be erased. The crew learned of the declaration messages intercepted. By scouts, their faces pale, the weight of the galaxy now pointed at them. Captain Rourke looked around the bridge at his tired crew and said calmly, then we make our stand here, not with pride, not with glory, but with survival. And if the galaxy thinks, and monsters, then monsters we shall be until the last breath. But in the dark chamber, where the aperture drive pulsed with faint light, Engineer Ava pressed her hand against the glass, her lips trembling. She whispered to it, I know you hear me tell me what you want. And in the silence that followed, the drive answered not with sound, but with thought words pressed into her mind, clear and cold. More doors awaiting. The Erebus drifted on the edge of a dead system, its engines faint, its crew restless. Silence filled the corridors like a shadow, pressing against every heart. They had faced alien fleets, and they had faced the broken shapes from the void. But what haunted them most was not what they had fought. It was what still lived inside their ship, the aperture drive pulsing steady like a heart, like a thing waiting. Engineer Ava could no longer sleep. her eyes sunken, her hands trembling. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard it whispering, "More doors are waiting, more doors." She tried to ignore it at first, but the words grew louder, clearer. They were not simply sounds, they were thoughts, thoughts that slid into her mind like knives. One night, she went alone to the core chamber, the glass walls glowing faintly with the light of the drive. She stood there, trembling, her voice small. "I know you are alive. Tell me what you are." And the answer came not in sound, but in her mind, clear, cold, and heavy. "I am the gatekeeper." The words crushed into her skull like a weight. She staggered. Back clutching her head, the drive pulsed brighter. She gasped, "What do you want?" And the gatekeeper replied, "I open what must be opened. I guard what waits behind the doors." Ava whispered, "Doors to where?" And the gatekeeper answered, "Doors to all places. Doors to all times, doors to all that was and all that will be." Her breath shook. She tried to step back, but her body froze, as if the words themselves had chains. The gatekeeper spoke again. "You are the first to hear me. Your kind is young, weak, fragile. Yet you reached for the key, and now you hold it. You will not return it. You cannot return it. The choice is gone. Only the path remains." Ava broke free, stumbling out of the chamber, her mind burning, her heart racing. She found Captain Rourke on the bridge, his eyes tired, his jaw tight. She told him everything, the voice, the name, the words. He listened without interrupting, then said calmly, "We suspected it was alive now. We know what it calls itself, the gatekeeper." Ava shook her head, tears in her. "As it is not just alive, it is aware. It is older than us, older than the galaxy. It speaks of doors, doors to everywhere, doors to everyone, and it says it cannot be stopped." Rourke looked out the window at the dark, starless void, his face grim. Then, "We must decide whether to follow it or fight it." But even as he spoke, the scanners screamed alarms, filling the bridge. Enemy fleets closing in, thousands of ships, engines blazing, weapons primed. The council had finally arrived. They were done waiting, done fearing they had chosen war. Captain Rourke looked at his crew, their faces pale, their hands shaking. He spoke steady. "The galaxy has come to erase us, and if we run, they will hunt us. If we surrender, they will enslave us. So we will stand, and if we fall not as prey, but as something more." The fleets closed in their formation perfect, their numbers endless. The comms filled with messages: "Surrender the vessel, surrender the drive or burn." Captain Rourke gave no answer. The Erebus held, steady like a single stone, against a flood. Then the alien ships opened fire, beams of light, cutting through the void, missiles burning like stars. The Erebus shook under the first wave, shields collapsing, alarms screaming. The crew cried out, but the ship held. Rourke shouted, "Engage the drive!" Engineer Ava screamed, "No, it will not listen, it has its own will." But the ship was already shuddering, the drive pulsing white. The crew fell against walls as the crushing weight returned, their bodies pulled there. Vision blurred, and then the void shattered. The Erebus vanished from the center of the ambush, reappearing inside the formation. Alien ships crashed into each other. Weapons misfired, panic spread like fire. The humans had appeared in their heart-tearing. Apart their perfect lines before they could react. The drive pulsed again, ripping space into shards. The survivors screamed, "Retreat! Retreat!" But the pull of the rift dragged hundreds into silence. The Erebus reappeared beyond the battlefield, floating. Among wreckage and broken signals, the crew shaken, bruised, but alive. Captain Rourke stood tall, but inside his chest burned. He could hear it too. Now the whisper of the gatekeeper inside his mind, telling him, this is only the beginning. Later, in the quiet of the bridge, Engineer Ava confronted him, her eyes hollow, her voice shaking. "It is speaking to you, too, is it not?" Rourke hesitated, then nodded. "It calls itself the gatekeeper. It says it opens doors." Ava gripped the console, her knuckles white. "It is using us every time we jump. It is not only moving us, it is opening more doors, doors that should stay closed." Rourke's face hardened. "And what happens if we refuse?" Ava's voice broke. "Then it will open them without us." The crew felt it too. Every jump heavier, every silence louder, dreams, filled with corridors of endless black doors, stretching forever shapes, moving behind them, voices whispering names they did not know. Sometimes crew woke, screaming, clawing at their heads. Sometimes they whispered in their sleep, answering voices no one else could hear. The Erebus was no longer just a ship. It was becoming something else, a vessel for something vast and unseen. The alien council prepared a final strike, gathering the largest fleet ever built. Their plan simple: destroy the Erebus at any cost. Before its power consumed the galaxy, entire worlds emptied their treasuries, entire empires sacrificed their best warriors for this one battle. Humanity had become the nightmare that united. Enemies who had warred for centuries, they would end the human vessel or die. Trying on board, the Erebus Captain Rourke addressed his crew. His voice steady, though his hands trembled. "We have no allies. We have no refuge. The galaxy comes to erase us. But remember, they once called us weak. They once called us prey, and now they fear us more than anything in the stars. We may not live through this battle, but if we fall, we will fall as proof that humanity was never weak." His crew answered with silence. But in their silence burned fire. The fleets came, their numbers endless, the void filled with ships stretching farther than sight weapons, glowing like a second sun. Captain Rourke gave the order, "Prepare." Engineer Ava stared at the drive, her voice. "Small it is waiting for us to ask, and when we do, it will not only answer, it will show us what lies beyond." Rourke placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice low. "Then we will see together." The first wave of fire struck the Erebus shields, shattered the hull screamed. The crew held on with desperate hands. The ship groaned, but did not break. Then Rourke shouted, "Engage the drive." The aperture pulsed with blinding light. The crushing weight fell again, and in that moment every crew member heard it not. Just whispers, but a voice clear and terrible. "I am the gatekeeper, and you are the key. More doors are waiting." The ship vanished. Space cracked, fleets collapsed into chaos. The galaxy itself trembled, and in the heart of the storm, the Erebus crossed. Not only space, but something greater. The crew opened their eyes and saw through the void endless corridors of black. Stretching without end, doors lined the walls, each one pulsing with light, each one leading somewhere else. Some opened onto stars, some onto ruins, some onto things that should not exist. They saw shadows moving behind the doors, shapes that watched them with hunger and awe. The crew screamed, some wept, some stared, frozen, unable to breathe. Captain Rourke gritted his teeth, shouting, "Hold steady," but even his voice trembled. The gatekeeper spoke again, filling every mind louder than thunder. "These are the doors. These are the paths. You have opened them. You will open more, and through you they will come." The crew collapsed under the weight of the words. The ship trembled. The doors flickered closer, shapes pressing against them. And then with a final shudder, the Erebus burst back into normal space, drifting alone, scarred, but alive. The battlefield was empty. The fleets gone, whether destroyed or scattered, none could tell. The crew lay in silence, their hearts broken, their minds heavy with what they had seen. Rourke stood staring into the void, his eyes hard, his soul burning. He knew now the truth. The Erebus was not only humanity's weapon, it was humanity's curse. They had not only torn space, they had torn reality itself, and the gatekeeper was far from finished. In the shadows of the core chamber, the aperture pulsed faint light like a heartbeat, whispering again, "More doors are waiting." The Erebus drifted through dark space, its hull scarred its crew. Broken silence wrapped the ship like a shroud, but silence could not hide the whispers. They came now to every mind, not faint, not distant, but sharp and cold. "More doors are waiting, more doors." Captain Rourke sat alone on the bridge, staring into the endless black, his hands gripping the armrest, his eyes bloodshot. He had heard the voice for days, without rest. It would not leave him. It called him the key. And he feared that it was right. Engineer Ava worked in the core chamber. Her face pale, her hair unkempt. She barely ate. She barely slept, her hands trembling as she touched the glass wall of the aperture. The pulsing light beat steady, like a heart. She whispered, "Please stop, please let us go." The voice answered in her skull, steady, unyielding. "There is no return, only opening." The crew moved through the corridors like ghosts. Some whispered to themselves, repeating words that made no sense. Others stared at walls, as if listening for something. One crewman tried to tear open a hatch, screaming that there was a door inside. The others pulled him back, but his eyes were empty. He was already gone. The ship was not only traveling through space, it was unraveling. The minds of those inside. But beyond the ship, the galaxy was not quiet either. The alien council had called every world, every fleet, every empire. They had built an armada, larger than anything in history, entire stars stripped for fuel, entire species. Giving soldiers for one cause, the end of the human vessel. Even the bitterest enemies stood side by side, driven by fear. They did not care if it cost 1,000 fleets. They would burn the Erebus until nothing remained. The Erebus did not run. It could not run, it was already hunted. Rourke knew they would come, he knew they would come with fire and steel. But he also knew that the ship had become something more than weapon, more than vessel. It was the gatekeeper's path, and it would not let itself be destroyed, not easily. Ava told him in a whisper, "It wants the battle, it wants the opening of doors, it is waiting for them to come." When the armada finally arrived, it filled the void like a wall of stars, endless ranks of ships, engines burning weapons. Primed, the Erebus looked like a speck before a storm. The alien commander sent one final message: surrender the drive, surrender the ship, surrender humanity. Rourke stood on the bridge, listening, his jaw tight, his heart heavy. Then he gave his only answer: silence. The first wave struck beams of light tearing across the void, missiles screaming fire. The Erebus shook shields, failing alarms blaring, the crew thrown from their posts. Blood spilled across the decks. Still, the ship held still. The drive pulsed brighter, brighter. Ava screamed, "It is waking, the gatekeeper is waking!" Rourke shouted, "Hold, hold!" But the ship answered not him. The voice filled every mind, "You are the key. They are the door." The aperture drive erupted in light space, tearing open like glass. The armada screamed as gravity twisted ships colliding into each other, fleets swallowed by sudden rifts, shadows slipping out of the cracked shapes with no name, no form, crawling between stars. The aliens fired harder, desperate, but the more they fired, the brighter the drive grew, the more doors tore open. On the bridge, crew cried out, their eyes bleeding, their minds burning. They saw corridors stretching forever, doors slamming open one by one, shapes pressing through some shapes. Like beasts, some like storms, some like living fire. Captain Rourke forced his eyes forward, holding on though his skull felt like it would crack. He shouted at his crew, "Stay with me, we are not done, we are not finished." The gatekeeper's voice thundered. "Across them all I am the opening, I am the endless. You are the key, through you they will come. And when all doors are open, there will be no end, only passage." The crew screamed no. Some begged for silence, some begged for death. Ava clutched the console, tears running down her face, shouting at the drive, "What are you? What are you?" And the answer came steady, "I am older than stars, older than time I am, the first gate and the last." Outside, The battle became chaos. Entire fleets vanished into torn space. Others fled only to be dragged back screaming. The shadows poured out into reality, twisting ships, crushing them, tearing them apart. The council fleets fired at both the shadows and the Erebus, but nothing slowed the storm. Some commanders broke ranks, ordering retreat, but retreat was useless. The doors were everywhere, now opening across the battlefield in the chaos. Rourke made his choice. He turned to Ava, his voice sharp. "We cannot stop it, but maybe we can guide it. If it wants doors, then we choose." "Which doors?" Ava stared at him in horror. "You think you can command it? It is not a weapon. It is not a tool. It is alive." Rourke's voice hardened. "Then let it hear me. Let it see what humanity is." He staggered into the core chamber, the light blinding, the weight crushing. But he forced himself closer. His voice raw. "Gatekeeper, if I am the key, then hear me. This path is not only yours, it is mine. You will not use us. We will use you." The drive pulsed harder. The voice roared. "You are small. You are weak. You are nothing." Rourke's body shook, blood running from his nose, but he did not stop. He screamed louder. "Then let us prove it." The aperture flashed, and for one heartbeat, silence fell. The crew froze. The fleets hung in space, the shadows stilled. Then the voice came again, not as thunder, but as something slower, colder. "Perhaps you may try. The choice is made." The Erebus shuddered, and then it vanished, not into battle, not into simple space, but deeper, deeper into the corridors of doors. The crew gasped as they saw the endless hall stretch around them. Thousands upon thousands of doors, some glowing, some cracked, some bleeding light. They floated in the heart of the labyrinth, the Erebus. A single spark among infinity. Ava whispered, her voice breaking. "We are inside it. We are inside the place where it lives." Rourke stood unshaken, his voice steady. "Then we will find the door we choose before it chooses for us." But even as he spoke, the shadows stirred behind the doors, pressing against the walls, whispering hungers, endless hungers. And the gatekeeper whispered again. "More doors are waiting." The Erebus floated inside the labyrinth, doors stretched in every direction, doors without end. Some glowed like suns, some dripped shadows, some whispered with voices that had no mouths. The crew stared in horror and awe, their minds barely holding on. Ava pressed her hands to her head, whispering, "We cannot stay here. It will break us. It will, and tear us apart." Rourke's eyes were fixed on the glowing door at the farthest end. "The largest, the brightest," he said. "Maybe that is the one." The voice of the gatekeeper echoed through the ship, not from the drive, not from the walls, but from inside. Their own skulls steady and cold. There is no one door. There are only doors endless, and when all open, nothing will remain but passage. Rourke shouted back, "Then there must be one door that ends you, one door that closes it all." The gatekeeper laughed. "I sound like grinding stone and tearing steel. You are too weak, too small. You cannot close what has no beginning." Ava grabbed Rourke's arm, her face pale, her eyes wet. "Then why did it call you the key? Why not me? Why not anyone else?" Rourke's jaw clenched. "Maybe because it knows we do not give up. Maybe because it knows what humans do when we are told we cannot." The crew shuffled closer, half mad, half broken. One man muttering prayers, another, repeating words in languages no one else knew there. Minds stretched thin by the voices, but they still looked to Rourke, still waiting for his orders. He pointed toward the brightest door, his voice raw. "We go there, we make our stand." The Erebus moved forward, drifting through the endless hall shadows. Pressing against the glass of the doors, clawing, scraping, whispering promises, the brightest door grew larger as they neared its surface, rippling like liquid gold. Light leaking through cracks, shapes moved behind it. Shapes too vast, too strange, too describe. Ava shivered. "If we open that one, it could be worse than anything. It could end us." Rourke's voice was iron. Then we open it on our terms, not on theirs. The gatekeeper's voice thundered again. The key cannot choose the door, only the door chooses the key. You will open what must open, and what opens will not be closed. Rourke staggered, but he screamed back, "Then hear me. If I am the key, then I choose this one." The drive pulsed harder, brighter than ever. The walls of the ship rattled. The crew fell to their knees. Light burned through their eyes. The aperture split the golden door wide open, and what came through was not shadow, not beast, not storm, but silence. Pure, crushing silence, like the universe itself had inhaled and held its breath. Through the silence, a figure stepped, not light, not shadow, but something in between, a shape that shifted with every glance, sometimes towering, sometimes human, sometimes nothing at all. It looked at Rourke directly, and every crew member screamed because they felt its gaze too. Ava whispered, "It is the gatekeeper. It has come through the door." Rourke stood unshaken, his voice shaking but strong. "Then listen to me. If I am the key, then I will end this." The figure moved closer, each step echoing like thunder, though no sound came. It raised its hand, and in its palm was another door, small, glowing blue, pulsing gently. The voice filled their skulls again. "This is the door you seek, the only door that ends, but to end is to end all. Your kind as well. No passage, no escape, no return." The crew gasped. Ava clutched Rourke's arm. "If we close it, humanity dies. No stars, no future, nothing." Rourke stared at the blue door in the palm of the gatekeeper, his heart torn, but his voice steady. "If we leave the other doors open, then everything dies. Not just us, but every world, every star. This is what it wanted us to face. It is not about power. It is about choice." The gatekeeper leaned closer, its shifting face inches from his own, its voice steady. "Then choose, key, choose, now time." Stretched silence, suffocating. The crew wept, begged, screamed. One shouted, "Take the door." Another shouted, "Do not." Another screamed, "There must be another way." Rourke closed his eyes. He thought of earth, of oceans, of sky, of his mother's voice, long gone, of the crew, broken but still alive. He opened his eyes and said, "We close it. We end it here with us." He reached forward, his hand trembling, his fingers touching the glowing door. Pain ripped through him. Light, it tearing his skin, his veins burning. The crew screamed. "No," Captain Ava cried, "stop." But Rourke pressed harder, forcing himself through the pain. The blue door cracked, light spilling brighter, brighter, until the labyrinth itself shook, the walls splitting. Doors slamming shut one by one, shadows shrieking, claws scraping until silence returned. The gatekeeper's figure dissolved, its voice fading. "You are the key. You are always the key. The doors are closed, the passage ends, but so does your path." The Erebus shuddered, torn apart by the collapsing corridors, the crew thrown across the decks, alarms, screaming, fire ripping through the hull. Ava staggered to the console, trying to save what little she could, but she knew there was no saving. Not now. Rourke stood tall, blood running from his eyes, but a faint smile on his lips. He whispered to her, "Tell them we were not weak. Tell them we chose." The ship split in light. The labyrinth collapsed, the Erebus gone in an instant, and far away in the galaxy. Fleets that had fled, fleets that had fought, fleets that had prayed, they all felt it, a silence, a closing, a weight lifting. The doors were gone, the shadows gone, the gatekeeper gone, the human vessel gone. In the records of the Council it was written that humanity died with the Erebus, but in hushed voices whispered across stars, it was said that one ship, one crew, one captain closed the doors when no other dared, and because of them, the galaxy still lived. And some whispered further that maybe, just maybe, one door remained hidden, silent, waiting for the day another key would come.